Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll just give people a couple minutes to get in and settled. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We're giving people a couple more minutes to come in, but we'll be starting in just a minute.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Wadello, and I'm the Director of External Affairs for the New York State Association for Affordable Housing, known as NYSAFAH. And I want to thank you for attending today's webinar on solar for mid-cycle affordable housing. A lot of interesting things in the IRA that can help affordable housing owners and operators that are interested in solar. And so you'll hear from our wonderful panel today on what's out there and how they can access help with these funds that will for their buildings. I want to really thank Solar One Housing Sustainability Advisors and the Housing Partnership for their participation pulling together this wonderful presentation. Just want to go over a little bit of the agenda for today and mention that if you have questions throughout this webinar, you can use the Q&A feature or chat feature to put your question in there, and we'll try to save some time at the end to answer those questions, or if they are relevant to what we're talking about in the moment, we can certainly weave that in there. So please do that. And we're recording this, and we'll figure out a way to make it available for everyone after the event if you want to review it again or share it with other colleagues. We're going to, in a minute, I'll kick off some introductions so you know who is on the panel. And then we will take them through a little bit of a Solar 101 to make sure that we all have at least a bottom floor of knowledge on what we are talking about when we do talk about solar. And then we will move through cost savings and incentives that are available and the financing and lender consents that go with that. And then a little bit about what to expect when installing solar. And then finally, we'll end with some Q&A. And again, please use our chat feature or the Q&A feature so we can take your questions and review them throughout today's webinar. I'll just kick off. My name's, as I mentioned, Chris Wadello, and I'm with NYSAFAH, and we are the Affordable Housing Trade Association in New York. We represent really kind of a larger umbrella of people who are involved in the production or preservation of affordable housing, from architects all the way through the building managers at the end. So if you're looking for more information, you can visit us at NYSAFAH.org. And I will just put a plug in and talk a little bit more about it. We have an annual conference happening on May 18th here in New York City. And I will put a link to some information on that conference into the chat if you're interested in attending. I'm now going to turn it over to Carly Ayakawa from Solar One for her introduction.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Ayakawa, and I'm a program manager with Solar One. So Solar One is a nonprofit that provides solar technical assistance for free to a whole range of building stakeholders like community organizations, building owners, and renters. And we have this goal of providing, making solar more cost effective and accessible to all. So today you're going to hear from Annika Wister-Jones, who is the director of Here Comes Solar at Solar One, as well as Kate Selden, who is our policy analyst. I'll hand things over to Jared to introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Jared Lang with Housing Sustainability Advisors. I actually share my time developing a couple of solar deals for a nonprofit down in the DC area, and co-developing solar with housing owners, mostly in the Mid-Atlantic, but have experience all across the country. Oh, you're on mute, Carly.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to end the poll so we can see the results. So it looks like there's a pretty good range of people here. We have like mostly developers, but a lot of different groups are represented. And it looks like a pretty good distribution of people's experience on putting solar on buildings. And we had a couple of people answer the hurdles, so we're excited to get into that. So given our diverse audience, we wanted to set the stage with some Solar 101 slides to get on the same page. So as many of you all know, the cost of solar has dropped really rapidly over the past decades. At the same time, the number of solar projects being deployed has grown really greatly. But in New York, despite this growth, we still face a bunch of barriers like construction red tape, so long permitting processes for stakeholders like Con Edison and the Department of Buildings. Most buildings in New York City are multifamily. That makes going solar a bit more complex because there's many families under a single rooftop. And finally, we all know that we live in a very, very dense urban environment, and that makes construction just more difficult. So despite these challenges, there are a lot of compelling reasons why we still want to go solar in New York City. For one, we have a really old and dirty constrained power grid. You can see the chart on the right that a majority of our electricity is produced by burning fossil fuels. And the small sliver that represents solar is like barely noticeable. And so there's a great opportunity to increase solar in our power mix. We also have this exciting goal of installing 1,000 megawatts of solar by 2030. And you can see we have a really long way to go. So we need a lot more solar on buildings. And finally, which I think is most important, we really need to go solar to address climate change and environmental justice. So in New York City, our buildings are accounting for the majority of emissions, as well the fossil fuel peaker plants that emit really dirty emissions are located in low-income communities of color. And so by increasing the amount of solar, it can help to reduce emissions from buildings, as well as reduce our demand on peaker plants. So this is a very simplified and nice kind of overview of how solar works. I'll describe it probably more dramatically than what's technically accurate, but basically the beautiful solar panels are on top of the rooftop. They're just like soaking up all that good sunlight, and like they're on vacation, but they're not. They are working really hard. They are working to produce direct current electricity. But our buildings use alternating current electricity, and that is where this little guy, the inverter, comes in. It transforms DC electricity into AC electricity so that it can be used, and it sends it along to the meter in number 3 that measures how much electricity the solar system is producing. And then any excess electricity that's not used by the building can be exported to the Con Edison grid in exchange for credits on your bill. And what we see is that during times of higher solar production, like the summertime, you can actually like stock up on those credits so that in the wintertime, you can use those credits to offset your bill. And something to note is that this is a grid tied system. So if Con Edison is experiencing a blackout, the solar system will turn off, and that's to ensure the safety of the line workers. So in New York City, we see 3 main types of solar installations. And for the next few slides, I'll go into each of them and things to consider when you're deciding which one to pursue. So ballasted is going to be your lowest cost option. You can see in the photos that there are actual cement blocks that ballast the panels to the roof, and there are limited roofing penetrations. So that's good. If your roof needs to be repaired or redone, you can actually get the panels relocated for a day labor rate, and their dead weight is 5 to 8 pounds per square foot. Something to consider when with the design and the maintenance of the system is if your panels have less than a 5-degree tilt, it's going to need more cleaning. So you might want to consider like a 10-degree tilt of the panels so that more like that rainwater can wash off that New York City dust and grime. All right, then we have a planar installation, and as you can see, they're raised around 4 to 6 feet off of the rooftop. So they're good for more space constrained roofs. They don't have like the inner row spacing like the ballasted systems did. You can access underneath the roof to a certain extent. And in terms of dead weight, it's 4 to 6 pounds per square foot, so a little less than the ballasted system. And when you are considering installing a planar installation, it's good to do that at the same time as like roof resurfacing so that the attachments of the racking can be made prior to the final roof layer. All the installations, attachments have to be flashed in order to deter any water from accessing the roof or getting into the roof. And finally, we have canopy installations, and we hear a lot of different names for them, like trellis or pergola mounted. You probably see them because they're like mounted 9 or more feet off of the roof level. What's nice is that you can really access the roof space and put like HVAC equipment and allow your tenants to use the space. And there are going to be different styles of canopy installations with different price points. So on the left, you see some really nice structural steel installations that are more costly than the ones on the right, which are like aluminum pole and frame canopy installations. Canopy is nice because the panels are super high and out of reach. You know, if someone wants to tag them or tamper with them, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But they are the most expensive, usually 20% more. But you get what you pay for because they also produce the most solar electricity. Okay, I'll pause here just to see if anyone has any questions, but if not, I can just hand things over to Kate.
Great.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just put this in the chat, but oh, we have one question from Jules. Why does canopy produce more? Carly, do you want to take that?
Sure, but you might want to correct me, but canopy produces more because you're able to you don't need to have like the FDNY compliance pathways because they're like mounted to the roof. And so you have more space on the rooftop to add panels, and there's also no inter-row spacing. So you can just fit a lot more panels with a canopy installation compared to the other two.
Great. And one more question, how do you clean the trellis panels, so the back canopy?
Well, you don't want to stand on them. You don't want to just bring a hose up. You want to hire probably professional solar panel cleaning companies.
Yeah, and typically using just water and like a squeegee is the safest way because they're very sensitive.
Yeah, no like harsh chemicals.
If you're cleaning them at all, which most people don't, I should just say. In New York, where we have a lot of rain and not as much dust as in like Arizona, for example, most people don't bother cleaning their solar. As long as it's at like some degree of tilt, it should be fine.
And I see one other question about the weight per square foot. This will depend on the type of canopy system that you use. So like Carly explained, you know, the structural steel is going to be a lot heavier. So, and Annika, you can jump in if you have an estimate for that weight. But some of the canopy systems are essentially just a higher version of the planar system. So those should be similar, around that 4 to 6 pounds per square foot. So depending on what kind of roof you're working with and the kind of the structural load that it can bear, that might determine what type of canopy system you want.
Yeah, once you're talking about a canopy and the structural steel, for example, you're not really as concerned with the weight per square foot because all of the weight is concentrated in those support areas. And so one of the steps of designing a solar energy system is that they'll have a structural engineer analyze the roof and figure out where it can support the actual attachments for the canopy system and which type of system is best for it. But that's very important and has to be done by an engineer.
And we're going to get to roof warranties a little later, so I'm going to save that question. We'll do one more now, just so we can keep moving. Sam asked, are there certain types of vents above which canopies cannot be located and what sort of clearances are required? Yeah, so it depends what kind of vents and equipment you have. I know for folks looking to do, you know, electrify or put, you know, different HVAC equipment on the roof, you'll have to check how much airspace is needed above those. Sometimes it's 4 feet, sometimes it's 6 feet. So that's something you should, you know, check with the equipment that you're using. Solar panels do best when it's cooler, so that is a consideration. You do want, you know, some space under above whatever vent you're using. All right, I think we should move on, but we can get to the rest of the questions after. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the cost and savings associated with solar. So when we look at the cost of solar, it's typically represented in a dollar per watt cost. And this is essentially like the unit cost of the system or of the installation. And it's a turnkey price. So it includes everything from initial contract and screening through the design, applications, and permit submissions. And that's to all relevant agencies. So Con Edison, NYSERDA, DOB, FDNY, landmarks if needed, and includes, the system design as well as the structural analysis and engineering, like Annika mentioned. And then, of course, the cost includes the procurement of the equipment and the installation. And then it includes all, interconnection approvals, final sign-offs and inspections until the system's turned on. And then, the cost should really include a workmanship warranty, a manufacturing warranty, and then some contracts will include ongoing remote monitoring. So it's a really comprehensive price when you look at the cost of solar. And so there's two main ways to save money when you go solar. Obviously, we know about the bill savings by reducing your electricity usage. But right now we have really strong rebates and incentives at the local, state, and federal level that make going solar really beneficial, particularly for affordable housing. So I'm going to take you through the different incentives that affordable housing has available in New York right now. So the first one is NYSERDA's New York Sun rebate. So this is a rebate program in which the incentive gets paid directly to the installer once the installation is complete, and essentially reduces the upfront cost to the owner of the system. And this is for all different types of housing. And for affordable housing right now, it's $1.60 to $2 a watt. And so when you're looking at, $3 a watt or $4 a watt of the system overall, that's a huge portion of the cost. The next incentive is the federal tax credit, which just increased thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's a base of 30% of the system cost. And there's additional bonuses that Jared's going to talk about in a minute. But this is a really important incentive available to all different types of buildings right now. Most notably, nonprofits can now take advantage of this tax credit because of the Inflation Reduction Act. It made it direct pay. And so that's a huge incentive now available to affordable housing. The next one is the state tax credit, and this is only available to owner-occupied buildings. So primarily it applies to co-ops and condos and it gets distributed to the shareholders, but less applicable to multifamily rentals. There's also accelerated depreciation, and right now it's a bonus year one, 80% accelerated depreciation. It is going to step down over the next several years, but that's available for commercial entities and for-profit entities. And then finally, the New York City, its local solar incentive is a property tax abatement. Unfortunately, because most affordable housing and nonprofits are not paying property taxes or already have them abated, it's not as relevant. Though we are trying to change this, so I will give a little pitch at the end for a policy initiative we're working on to make this more accessible for affordable housing. And then I just wanted to dig in a little bit more to the New York Sun rebate because it's such a powerful incentive we have in New York State. So like I said, it gets paid directly to the installer, and it kind of acts as an incentive for the installer to finish the installation so that they can get paid. It covers up to 30 to 60% of the cost of solar. And so because so much of the payment to the installer comes at the very end, you might see when you're working through contracts that installers may front load those milestone payments to kind of compensate for the large portion that they're getting coming at the very end. And so I'm going to note this is a capacity-based incentive. So NYSERDA releases tranches of it. And you can see this is their dashboard showing, each tranche and how much of it is used up. The incentive for affordable housing is, $1.60 or $2, depending on the configuration. And this has really stayed stable, for a relatively long time, but it's not permanent, indefinite. So the best way to ensure that you're going to lock in that incentive is to sign a contract with an installer, and then have them submit an interconnection application. And that will ensure that, you lock in that dollar per watt incentive, even if you're installing your solar 6 months later because you need to do roof work or had other things going on, you still can ensure that incentive. All right, and now I will hand it over to Jared to walk us through the Inflation Reduction Act.
Sure, yeah. So I was invited to kind of dig a little deeper into some of the financing tools that we're using, and I'm working with many different housing owners, developers across New York and the country, adding in solar and energy efficiency into their refinancings and new construction deals, and their existing assets. So I think, I'm sure you all have heard a lot about the IRA. We did a webinar about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act for NYSAFAH already. And, but for those that haven't seen it, some of it, I just want to, the world of the IRA is kind of broken up between those things that are available now, and directly available to us as in the development community, and then those things that are kind of coming, maybe flowing through our state agencies. So the solar tax credit has been around for a while. It's been extended. They've added some bonuses to it. There are some new items that are going to eligible basis, and there's some new ways to use it. And I'll talk more about that, but don't want to spend a ton of time here for those that have seen this already. There's the Section 45L tax credit, which is a tax credit that's available, $2,500 a unit for getting Energy Star certification and $5,000 a unit for doing DOE net zero energy. And in New York, a lot of our projects, whether they might not be actually certifying, going through the process of certifying, are already doing everything that's required. And I'm working with owners to just complete the certifications and pick up this extra tax credit. And then the Section 179D, it's a little less useful for us in multifamily housing, but it's a per square foot tax deduction, up to $5 a square foot, and pretty aggressive though to get up to $5 a square foot. So, but happy to talk more offline with everyone. And then there are some other things that we're tracking. There's a $1 billion program from HUD that's going to go directly into Section 8 202s and supportive housing, just for upgrades and solar. It's going to be grants. And then there's a lot of money that's going to be flowing through state energy offices like NYSERDA. And just a little sampling is rebates to multifamily properties for $14,000 a unit for HVAC upgrades and electrification. I think this is going to move the needle. So I just wanted to show how the new solar investment tax credit is stackable. And basically the baseline was 26%, now it's 30%. And then you can add on bonuses for low income, for using domestic content, and for being located in energy communities. We're finding that regulated housing is having a really easy time clicking off this 50%. Some of our owners are getting up to 60, and we're looking for how to get it to 70. Next. I did just want to mention, besides the bonuses, that this direct pay piece is pretty exciting for nonprofits and nonprofit sponsors of assets that are technically part of a for-profit, but the GP is a nonprofit. I know that's a bit of a nuance, and the way we have to structure things in affordable housing. And then the the credit is actually transferable now, and it can be sold for owners that don't have a tax appetite. Next slide. Questions?
So we have one question, Jared, in the chat that maybe you can speak to from Dan. It's the IRA ITC boost can be received by sharing the benefits of the solar with the tenants. Can you share any examples of how that would work in affordable housing building? I
So
believe that's the 20%.
I just came from an event at the Treasury, talking about, like, earlier today, talking about some of these things. They have not released the formal guidance yet in terms of the specifics on this, but they're going to give you like a suite of options. And we've really been encouraging them in regulated affordable housing to just allow the savings going to the property as the benefit. But they're going to offer you a set of options. If that doesn't come through, they're going to allow things like financial education, buying computers and laptops for resident services, and actual check payments in the most basic.
Great, thanks for that, Jared.
Sure, we'll get
it's
a little
always-
more guidance on that, but I think, we did some just looking at doing some analysis of giving away half of the power, for, and it's probably going to end up being a 5-year like period. So taking the tax credit up front compared to giving away 5-year 50% of the power for 5 years, the return is there.
That's great. That's great to hear that analysis. One other question from Anna is, by participating in one of these programs, would we be disqualified from participating in, for example, a weatherization program as well? Do you know about the compatibility?
No, I mean, they're really trying to. There was a lot of changes that were done to the tax credits to make them more accessible. And they're trying to make these benefits stackable, like the stuff with the greenhouse gas reduction fund and taking loans from different CDFIs and pots of money. So no, you can stack these incentives, and you can, you can take loans and add these things together for the most part, I would say.
That's great. All right, I think we can move on to the next section.
Okay, so they asked me to talk a little bit about some of the models for mid-cycle solar ownership. So these are really the options that are out there at the moment, and maybe there's others, but this is what I've seen in the game. So the direct purchase is basically the property LLC business buying the solar for the site. And this is very challenging. I rarely see this because of the consents that are involved, and affordable housing properties not having a lot of cash flow, or just difficulty with interested parties. The second option is sort of a portfolio scale solar approach. I should actually say I should start with the power purchase agreement. So because it's difficult to purchase directly the solar, a lot of owners will look at not having to finance the system and just committing to purchasing power for the long term from an outside third party. And it functions really, I know probably most of you are familiar with this, but the way I describe it, it's like, like a laundry contract or a vending machine contract, but you're just purchasing power. And then the third option is, if you want to try to do something at a portfolio scale, and I like to add this graphic because people have some what we're talking about here is a housing owner setting up a separate LLC to own solar on top of multiple assets. And it just kind of, it gets this, it's nice because it gets the scale to actually, make it competitive with some of our development deals. And, presents an opportunity for like a development fee. So go ahead, next slide. So I just have a kind of a case study of some common buildings that we see that we run solar on in New York City. And, this is Bronx, couple of buildings in the Bronx and Brooklyn, 90 kW, 80 and 80, like a total of 250 kW. And you can look at, so we'll look at these separately and then we'll look at them together. So next slide. So I'm glad that the Solar One team was able to talk a little bit about the incentives, and now you could see them in practice a little bit. So if we start from the left and we go to the right, so let's talk about direct purchase. And if we were doing one of these projects, the 90 kW one, and we were buying it on behalf of the property, we could figure out how to get the money and how to do the gymnastics on this. The system cost is like $360,000. The project would generate either a tax credit or a refund for 180 grand. The New York Sun grant at $1.60 would be 144,000. So the total upfront sources that you would generate is 324 grand on 360 of cost. So your actual cost is $36,000, and your savings is about 20 grand a year. It's about a 2-year payback and a very strong unlevered IRR. If you weren't able to do it that way, which most people are not, most companies I work with are not able to do it that way. Then they either look to do a power purchase agreement, where, zero upfront costs, but you may only get 25 to 50% of the savings. So what I did was I said, what if we looked at all 3 of the projects? So that's 250 kW, and there was no, there should be that there's a mistake right there on the total net cost. It should be 0. Yeah, sorry about that. And then, half of the savings is probably about 25,000 a year. So it's a fair bit of brain damage to get to that savings, but there's no cost up front. And we're meeting local law 97, we're being good environmental stewards. I just find, unfortunately, a lot of these power purchase agreements don't get done because of the amount of work relative to the benefit. And then lastly, which we find that a lot of the sort of higher capacity or more driven, mission driven, sometimes housing owners want to look at portfolio scale solar, look at financing solar across multiple assets. We're in a position now where nonprofits can own a solar company and get a refund. So if you were to finance the whole 250 kW in like all 3 projects, all 3 sites in one financing, it's about $1 million in cost. You generate tax refund of $500,000. The New York Sun grant on 250 kW is $400,000. So you got about $900,000 in sources. Your total net cost is 100 grand. You can have a development fee of up to 20% on that, and it generates savings of $50,000 a year. So these are we're doing deals in all different structures, all 3 of these structures on existing assets, and just depends on the risk and reward profile of each entity. So lastly, they asked me to talk a little bit about the consent process for the different structures. So when you're looking at direct purchase, you need if you're going to try to use reserves, which I've done before, you need lender consents to draw down your reserves. Or you need investor consents to inject new capital into your deal. Or if you want to use outside debt, then you need investor and lender consent to bring in new debt, subordinate debt. This usually is really challenging. Power purchase agreements can also be tricky, and this is where you really get stuck, because they require lender consent to sign a lease and lease a portion of your property. And sometimes a solar company wants a non-disturbance agreement, which can be tricky to negotiate with the lenders. The portfolio purchase is really kind of the same consent issues as the power purchase agreement, but you have a development fee and capacity to actually get it done, which is nice. So it's taking on a bigger project. And then just some other considerations, I usually say between 3 to 6 months for the consent, to get the consents out of the lenders. The investors are faster. You really want to have like a really clear package and a clear ask, with the lease agreement itself, with the consent forms that you want to use, and some of your risk mitigation strategy. I mean, they're very protective of the roofs. So I like to add a roof protection strategy. And then you need to have a budget for legal fees for the investors and lenders. They usually pass those on to you. And, you should expect that this is going to be a real project for staff, and there will be time that has to be allocated. And I would recommend like some sort of tracker to keep track of all of the different consents between investors, first position lender, second position lender, like, HPD, HCR, bond issuers, bond servicers. It's really the whole ball of wax. That's next slide. That's it for me. I know that was a lot, so happy to be here for questions.
Thanks, Jared. We'll take just one or two, and then we'll move on and save the rest for the end. One, Daphne asked, what's the downside with the power purchase agreement? If you could speak to that.
It's the savings is small, and it's a lot of work. And usually just the projects don't get done because of the size of the benefit relative to the amount of work.
Although I should say that with the new incentives, the savings have been getting higher. So I'm hopeful that there will be more power purchase agreements that happen in the near future, because it really is. I've seen power purchase agreements with like 30 to 50% savings off of original Con Edison bills, and that's worth it.
Yeah, well, I it used to be like 20. And, with these new incentives and everything, it better be like 50 to 100%, in different markets, like in DC and stuff. It's just, yeah, I just find the solar companies are a little slow to actually share the savings with the properties. So my 2 cents.
Great. And then one final question on this topic. Do you see trends in those different ownership models between new construction versus, preservation or mid-cycle buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. If you're doing new construction, we recommend direct ownership. I mean, it is, you can double dip. If you're doing a LIHTC deal, you double dip with the eligible basis of the LIHTC credits, and you're getting paid to do solar. And in fact, I was joking about this with some of the people from Novogradic. You not only at this stage, especially in New York, with the combination of the federal tax credits, the New York Sun incentive, and the dipping into the LIHTC rebate, you're silly. You're making a mistake. You're doing bad business not doing solar on your asset. Like it's not a no-brainer, it's bad business.
Great. Thanks for that, Jared. All right, we're going to move on to the last section and we'll turn it over to Annika.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll echo what Jared was saying just there. I think one of the cool things about the IRA was that they expressly encouraged double dipping between LIHTC and the solar tax credit. I've never seen that before, and I love that amount of like really encouraging people to go solar on affordable housing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about kind of the logistics of the actual solar development process. So here's a quick timeline, and this is kind of where Solar One and Housing Partnership, Housing Sustainability Advisors can help out if you want help. But we can talk about that more later. But basically, the first step is obviously figuring out whether a site is viable for solar, and then getting the contracts in place, finding a good contractor. We usually, like Jared said, expect 3 to 6 months for getting the lender and or investor consents. It takes about 3 months for the designs to be engineered and filed and get the permits. The installation itself, though, only takes a week or two. Maybe for canopies, it might take a month because those take a lot more, robust structure, but not very much. And then you usually end up waiting a few weeks for inspections. So it's possible to get a solar system from the original plan to savings actually flowing to the building in a year, depending on how quickly the building owner is willing to move. Next slide. We have some quick tips for how to choose an installer. I saw some questions about that in the Q&A, and we can go into that in more detail, but just overall, the most important thing to look for is an installer that's NYSERDA approved. In New York, if they don't have a NYSERDA approval, you should not use them. That's the most basic. You want to look for whether they have a good corporate track record, and especially for projects in New York City and on multifamily affordable housing. As you know, there are specific uses and specific situations that we have in the New York City affordable sphere that a solar installer who works primarily, upstate on single family homes wouldn't understand. Make sure that they have good operational capacity. And then you want to look on the proposal for their use of your roof space. Make sure that the equipment is high quality. For example, all solar panels should have at least a 25-year production warranty. So you can look at how much they're guaranteeing at 25 years. So are they guaranteeing 90% at 25 years? Are they guaranteeing 85%? That's not a huge difference, but that's one way to tell the different quality of solar panels. You also want to look for their warranties in general. So how robust is that 25-year production warranty? The inverter warranty usually has at least a 12-year warranty, sometimes a 20-year warranty. And the minimum required by the state for workmanship warranty is 5 years, but sometimes installers will offer 10. And so that's a good thing to look for as well. And then, of course, you also want to look at the pricing. We look at dollars per watt to be able to compare apples to apples. So if you have a 50 kilowatt system, if you're comparing a 50 kilowatt system and a 100 kilowatt system, the 50 kilowatt system, if you're just looking at gross dollars, would seem like the cheaper option, but it would get you much less power. So we always compare dollars per watt to see what the actual value of the proposal is. And we recommend getting references and interviewing the installers to make sure that you have a good rapport and they seem like they can do good work. Next slide. I'm sure many, if not all of you, have vast experience with negotiating contracts, but we just want to call out a few things that should definitely be in any solar construction contract. It should include the system size and panels, the interconnection method, whether it's behind the meter or whether they're installing a new meter. It should include the contract cost as well as the total cost pre-NYSERDA, so you can see what the difference is in case that NYSERDA rebate changes, you know what's going on. And it should have details for the workmanship warranty and the commitment and the specifics for how they are going to maintain your roof warranty. Obviously, the roof warranty is of paramount importance. All solar installers know how to maintain the roof warranty. And so the way they do that is they work with the roofing manufacturer and use the materials that are required. Sometimes there's an inspection required, but whatever that is, they need to be able to do that, and that should be in the contract. And then whatever insurance requirements that your building has, they should include that in the contract as well. Installation day is usually pretty quick. Like I said, it's just a couple of weeks. There should be a point person on site. They might need a hoist or a crane, depending on how tall the building is. If you're doing other kinds of retrofits, they could use the existing hoisting system. Obviously, bad weather might impact timeline, but it's not as bad as with roofing. You know, they can work in the cold, they can work in the rain sometimes. They just prefer not to. And there's really no impact on tenants except you know, some noise from the roof. And then all solar systems have some sort of monitoring. It comes from that inverter. And the monitoring will show you both what is being produced at any given hour, usually, but it'll also compare that to what was expected to be produced and what was produced, you know, last year this time. It's important to have automatic alerts set up because you're probably not going to remember to check this, you know, every month for 25 years, but you can set it up so that if something goes wrong, it'll send you an email or send you and the solar installer an email so that you can get it fixed. And we always recommend using the original solar installer to do any kind of maintenance or checkups because they know their system the best. So if you want more assistance and you want to know specifics, I saw a couple of specific questions in the Q&A as well. So Solar One, we're contracted to provide technical assistance for any building that goes through HPD or has ever had any contact with HPD or HDC, and our assistance is free. We do kind of that initial analysis. We'll help do procurement for installers. We don't do full solar plan sets or designs, but we'll do that estimates of what the system could be and how much you could save. You can look on HPD's Solar Where Feasible page for more information. We also have a resource document for solar for affordable housing, but also Housing Sustainability Advisors, Jared's outfit, and Housing Partnership. They can do co-development of those larger scale portfolio projects. And so absolutely reach out to them if that's something that you're interested in looking into. Basically, all of us can answer a lot of questions in a lot of different ways. And I think we have a couple other slides or announcements before we answer all of the rest of the questions. So Carly, do you want to go through this, and I'll leave this to Kate to finish us out?
Sure. So just a few sort of calls to action or next steps. So Solar One, we're actually undergoing a process of research and a listening tour to really understand your experience with going solar. So we shared a lot from our perspective, but we really want to gather, your insight, experience, and some of the challenges and successes that different buildings have had with going solar, and really to try to convey that information to the agencies and sort of support the overall process to make sure that it's streamlined, that everyone sort of is working together and coordinating. So if you'd like to talk more in depth with us one-on-one, please email us. Carly's email is on the screen. We'd really love to, set up a 30-minute call to really go through your experience and learn more about how we can make this an easier process. And then the next call to action is a policy initiative we're working on, Solar One is working on right now to, we mentioned all these incentives, and one of the ones that's local to New York City is a property tax abatement. But as I said, most affordable housing can't access it because they're already getting their property taxes abatement. And so we're trying to make it even more affordable for affordable housing and nonprofits to go solar by making this incentive direct pay. So it would mirror how the federal tax credit works. So we have a sign-on letter that we are delivering to city and state leaders. So this is just a pitch. If it's of interest to you, we're asking for an extension. We're asking for this property tax abatement to be direct pay so that nonprofits and affordable housing can access it. We're asking for it to cover solar and storage systems, since we know that's sort of where we're moving in the future. And we're asking for it to include the structure of parking canopies. We know parking lots are, going to be an important space for large-scale solar systems. So I'm going to drop a link, and if you're interested in supporting this effort, please sign on today so that we can help advocate for this incentive.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a plug for the NYSAFAH annual conference that's being held next week, May 18th, at the Marriott in Times Square. Registration will be open through the end of the week. So if you're in the area or thinking, where can I learn more about, to interact with Solar One and other organizations on sustainability, we've dedicated most of our conference to that topic. So there'll be tabling, there will be panel discussions, and just a great opportunity to network with people in the sustainability industry, solar industry, and housing industry in general. So you can visit the NYSAFAH website at nysafah.org or the conference website, but from the NYSAFAH website, you can jump right over to the conference. So I hope to see some of you in person. Thank you. And just to let you know that we did record this, and so we will make it available post event if you want to review anything that was discussed and you saw the contact information for our panel. And I do want to make the last call for any questions. We have a few minutes left, so if anybody has a specific question that was not answered, please throw it in the Q&A feature.
Are there other questions in the Q&A? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like, so we have one that's, how should a housing owner choose between a direct purchase and portfolio scale development? That might be
I mean, the first question is, if you have the cash flow, or if you think you can use reserves. That's the first question. Then the second one would be, what's the process for either using the cash flow or pulling down the reserves? And I think if you can sufficiently answer those questions and you have the funds, definitely connect with Solar One and get them to do a basic layout and cost and figure out a basic cost. But once you have the solar cost, if you can kind of work through if you can figure out the cash flow.
And then we also have a question about financing versus leasing solar panels. I don't know if Jared, that's something you have experience with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of all of what we're talking about here in terms of the power purchase agreement is kind of a lease agreement. There's similar types of things. Usually on regulated affordable housing, we don't do leases because the lease payments are considered commercial income. And then you get into a situation where you may have to consider carving out the roof as commercial space. It gets funky. So we usually, there's a carve out in the code, for the IRS, that savings of power is not considered income. So we usually trade, access to a roof or the ground next to our properties in exchange for discounted power.
And I can answer the other half of that question, which is, I want to go solar, but how do I know I won't get ripped off by a solar company? That was for a single family home. So our organization, that's pretty much what we do. This presentation is mostly for multifamily buildings, but we also have a residential arm. So if you reach out to us, we can connect you with the folks on our team who do residential solar work. And it's the same kind of thing. We can help you find a good installer who will do the work at a reasonable price. We can help you figure out what your estimated costs and savings would be. So that's true for single family as well as multifamily.
Great. And
Great.
there's, oh, I was just going to ask, do a quick answer for the final question. We don't know about any additional incentives for storage. And we know that some of the New York Senate incentives are stepping down after they're used up, but fortunately, the affordable housing incentive was just sort of set to stay the same in the most recent NYSERDA midpoint review. So that $1.60, $2 a watt is stable for now, and we hope it continues, but we don't always know. I'll pass it to you, Chris.
Well, on that, I just want to say thank you to everybody that took the time to be here today. We'll certainly share that the video, and you have the contacts. We'll send around, you make sure everybody has the contacts of everyone that was here. If you have a specific question about your project, thank you to Kate, Carly, Annika, and Jared for your time and expertise on this issue. And just on behalf of all of us, have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks.